Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of April of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. Of course we're going to start with Artyomovsk. As you can see, the Russian sources map has been updated. They show the Russian progress on the northern part of the western part of Bakhmut. They show progress in the vicinity of the railroad station, and also they're showing some kind of movements in direction of the southern part of the western part of Bakhmut. If we take a look at the deployment map, you're gonna see that this map has been updated since yesterday evening. Yesterday they show us that the progress just in the vicinity of the Rose Square in this area, and by this evening of the local time they showed Russian progress in direction of the northern part of the western Bakhmut and in the vicinity of the railroad station. As we discussed in the previous videos, the main goal and the main direction of the Russians is the central part of Bakhmut, this one, not the western but the central one. This area used to be a military base. As you can see, there are a lot of barracks, hangars in this area, and there are a lot of low buildings that Ukrainians are not able to destroy, to mine and explode them, and something like this. So it's the perfect direction. Furthermore, by attacking in direction of these barracks, the Russians will be able to encircle some parts and to force them to step back from their position. Furthermore, if you take a look, this map has been updated recently. Exactly in this area on the northern part of the western Bakhmut was under control of this 244 brigade, but now this brigade is located exactly in the vicinity of the exit from this area. So we see that a lot of forces are stepping back, and you see that we can see the progress that everything develops very fast. And this is the worst thing that can happen with the Ukrainians. Not the entire collapse of the western part, it will be collapsed sooner or later, but the progress, and that this progress and that everything develops very fast. The thing is that there are a lot of positions all over the Bakhmut, and I believe that there are a lot of problems with communication with the, let's say, parts and some groups of Ukrainian forces. And if the Russians are able to penetrate some position, let's say as when talking about this railroad station, currently we understand that Ukrainian forces that located between Tchaikovskого Street and on the south of railroad station is in a small salient. And according to this map, the forces that still located in the central part of Bakhmut are already encircled, and they got in a small local cauldron. I'm not sure that they are able to evacuate from this area. And currently, there is a situation in the western part of Bakhmut when, at least in the next few days, we're going to see a situation when the entire Ukrainian army in this area will be split into many parts, like 200 people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, and all these small fire points will be encircled by the Ukrainians. At least currently at this stage, for let's say for 7 p.m. of the local time, of Ukrainian local time, we see that there are at least 2 cauldrons, or 2 salients, or 2 artillery bags. This is the first one between Russian positions, and believe me, it is very difficult for the Ukrainians from now on to evacuate from this area. Of course, when talking about the towns that located along the Krasnaya Street, this one, they still have possibilities to escape. But the Ukrainians who are located currently in these big buildings, they are blocked. They don't have any chances to evacuate because the Russians have their sniper positions along this Livanevskого Street, and the same sniper position along this Krasnosilsky Street. So they are blocked. The same situation we can talk about, let's say, this part of Bakhmut. The forces that located in this area, they're also under fire control, and they can't evacuate. They are already erased from the story of Ukraine. The same situation about these forces, they are blocked. And the more days the more they pass, more and more cauldrons like this we're going to see. And at some certain point of time, we're going to see sooner or later the first who are going to surrender. And I can say that the day when some parts is going to surrender is going to be the final day, or the final page, or the final, I don't know, sentence of the Bakhmut story. As soon as some forces of Ukrainians will show an example that we can surrender not to die, and the Russians is okay with this. They will not punish you. They will not like cut your head off or something like this. Most of the Ukrainian forces in the western part of Bakhmut will surrender. I believe that from now on we can start counting days before the entire Bakhmut is going to fall. Let's go back to the Western sources map. To this map, as you can see, is not updated. Currently, we know that the progress in this area is something like this. According to the deployment map and deep state map as well. So we understand that the next thing in the next direction of the Russians is the military base that located in the central part. And of course, the Russians will try to develop their attack in direction of Tchaikovskого Street, this area. Everything as we discussed before yesterday. The Ukrainians is almost done. And today Zelensky, he made a meeting with his general staff, and he required from the head of this Bakhmut defense operation, Syrsky, to begin the unblocking operation. I don't know what exactly is he planning to do. What does he want? Maybe he still believes that it is possible. Maybe, who knows, maybe the Ukrainians managed to accumulate a lot of forces and the weather is fine and good to start doing something to unblock Bakhmut. But to tell the truth, I think that it's time to start negotiation process. As we saw the same negotiation process in Mariupol and so on, when the Ukrainians need to ask the Russians to allow them to evacuate from this town. Without weapon, of course, without tanks, there is no other solution for the Ukrainians who are stuck inside of Bakhmut. Furthermore, don't forget that according to the deployment map, there are a lot of volunteers, Georgian volunteers, Chechen volunteers, Belarusian volunteers. These guys don't have any options at all. They can't even surrender. They can't or run away or to die because they are not like the official Ukrainian army, and I'm not sure what the Russians are going to do with these forces. The best thing that can happen with them is, let's say, that they will be returned back to the mainland, like main country, like in Belarus or in Russia, and they will be like judged there and go to prison. It's the best thing for them if they are not able to evacuate from this town. Let's wait more. I believe that by the end of this weekend we're going to see more updates and maybe even the entire collapse of Bakhmut. The Russians are saying that Ukrainians are still fighting there and they're not going to give up. Very interesting. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, for example, reported that during the clashes, during the battle for Bakhmut, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 340 soldiers, 11 armored vehicles, and including 2 tanks. So as you can see, the loss is still very high. Now let's discuss another updates on the ground. And let's start for these purposes with Seversk and this front line. Because the Russians have activated their movements in this area as well. And currently the main location, the main target for the Russians is Belogorovka, this town. As you can see, the Russian sources map has been updated. The Russians managed to move and develop their bridgehead along the brushes, along the forest line, and they established control over the trenches in this area, and they got the outskirts of Belogorovka. From the same time, the Russians are pushing from the north, and they have already reached the Seversky Donetsk River, and they're already able to send commandos and scouts group. And as you can see, this is also another small salient, and there is a very high risk for the Ukrainians to be encircled. When we see that the Russians are pushing in the Serebryanka forest, less and less time Ukrainians that located in Belogorovka has less and less time to start normal evacuation. By the way, as you can see, the Ukrainians have big problems with evacuation. Usually they start evacuation at the time when there is no need to start any evacuation, and there is just one need to start surrendering. The same situation we can find in Kupiansk-Liman front line, and mainly on the Kupiansk front line. The Russians have activated in this area as well. They're saying that as a result of previous 24 hours actions in this area, they managed to spot few commandos group, they managed to destroy a number of artillery systems, there's a very heavy artillery duels, and for the maybe 10th time in a row, the Russians are saying that as a result of artillery duels and actions in this area, they managed to break another rotation process between the Ukrainian forces that located along Oskol River and along Zhiribets River. I believe that Ukrainian forces along Zhiribets River are very exhausted and very tired. And they see this situation as well, and maybe all these icons, all this activation are saying that maybe the Russians are planning to start something in this area. But if we remember the plan and the documents, the secret documents that were published by the man with the red pants, according to those documents, Kupin's front line has the less power, the less number of Russian brigades. I'm not sure about I don't remember exactly, but it doesn't seem that the Russians are going to attack and use this direction as the main, maybe as a support direction for Russian forces on Liman front line. For example, the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, if you calculate the losses of Ukrainians on Liman and the Kupin's front line, the Ukrainians lost 140 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. As you can see, the level of losses is not so high for the entire front line, but when talking about Liman front line, the accumulation of Russian forces on this area is almost the same as the Russian forces on Donbass front line. So these almost two equal front lines when talking about the number of forces. But we see that there are almost no activation in this area. Maybe they will do this or start doing this by the end of the story of Bakhmut. We'll see. It's very difficult to predict everything because everything can change anytime. Some interesting piece of news are coming from Donetsk. The Russians published another video of their storming in direction of Nivolskaya. You see that they're attacking this area with armored vehicles in this direction. So that means that they're very close to this town, and it's very likely that even within the next week or maybe two, the Russians finally will be able to establish control over Nivolskaya, and they will be able to establish control over the fields on the north of Krasnogorovka and on the southwest of Pervomaiskaya, and to cut or establish physical artillery control over the supply roads for this area. And they will finally, the Russians, solve the issues and the problems by the name of Pervomaiskaya and Nitailova, and to push the Ukrainians' artillery as far as possible from Donetsk. And of course they will reduce by that the level of shelling this town. As you can see, the Ukrainians continue attacking and shelling this town. There are a lot of icons. Almost every single day we receive another piece of news where the Russians are saying that another civilian was killed as a result of that attack. So I believe that by pushing the Ukrainians as far as possible, the bombing of Donetsk will be reduced till zero. When talking about Zaporozhye and Ugledar front line, when talking about Ugledar, there were not much updates from this area. The Russians report about just small artillery duels, attacking Ukrainian positions and so on. But when talking about Ugledar, the Russians have activated in this area as well. The Russians made another attack in direction of Orekhov using the guided bombs. The Russians are saying that using the Su-35, they're using guided bombs, they attacked Orekhov and they attacked the positions of the 65th Mechanized Brigade. If we will increase the number for a week, we see that Orekhov is under very heavy fire. As I understand, this is the main base and main concentration of the Ukrainian forces in this area, and I believe that tomorrow the Russians will provide us more information about the loss of the Ukrainian side, but I believe that they are very heavy. Furthermore, as you can see, the Russians attack the towns located in the vicinity of this area, so let's one more time increase the number of icons for a week. We see that the Russians are activated significantly in this area. Maybe this is some kind of artillery preparation. I don't believe in Russian counter-offensive operation or offensive operation in this area, but I believe that Ukrainians have collected a lot of forces there, and the Russians they have a very nice maybe a spy network in this area, maybe satellite control, so they're able to discover, and the thing they're doing is trying to reduce as much as possible Ukrainian forces in this area. The Russians are saying that as a result of artillery duels during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost just 52 soldiers and 4 armored vehicles. As you can see, the loss is not so big, but the Russians destroy one position of Ukrainian forces. Then the losses we're going to receive tomorrow, few ammo depots in this area. Also, the Russians destroy a few howitzers in this area, so they were pretty effective, or they're preparing for something anyway. And when talking about Kherson, the situation is the same. Artillery duels and so on, as you can see, but the Ukrainians are also pretty active from their side, and they're bombing the Russian bank of the river, trying to discover and spot the Russian positions. We don't have any piece of news about the losses from the Russian side, but the Ukrainians lost around 35 soldiers, 6 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems during the previous 24 hours. And that's it about the situation on the ground. And now it's time to discuss a little bit. Another topic is that this weekend is the Easter, Orthodox Easter, and I believe that there are going to be some kind of ceasefire, at least from the Russian side, not announced. I believe that the Russians will give possibilities and opportunity for the Russian soldiers during this weekend to call their relatives, to talk with their friends, with their families, to send some notes, messages, to go to churches, to pray to God, and so on. They will have this opportunity, I believe so. So I expect that within the next few days, the Russians will reduce their activity on the combat line. And also, they will use just artillery forces and the forces on the ground to prevent any counteroffensive operation from the Ukrainian side during these days. And I expect that on Monday, the Russians will start their final push and rush in the western part of Bakhmut. So we'll see. During these days, they will try to collect as much as possible ammo, manpower, forces, and on Monday they will start the final rush. And they will try to develop the bridgehead in the western part of Bakhmut by the end of this next week significantly. They need to break the situation, like the entirely to break, and not to allow the Ukrainians to restore their position. And then it's just going to be just a question of time, 2 or 3 or 5 days, and everything will be by the Russians or not. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.